How's everybody doing? Yeah? Feeling okay? When we talk about what we say, this is really a rich concept when it comes to our faith, because words really define us. Words really express and show where our hearts are. It's like our words are connected to our heart. And it often is reflected in what we say or don't say, the values that we have. It's really interesting. During the time of ancient Israel, when King David really, under his leadership, they expanded the territory of Israel right up to the Euphrates and right south down to Egypt. And it was really a time of wealth and power. A lot of the gold of the world kind of made its way to Palestine at the time. And there was a very powerful army and things. And as David's kingdom expanded, he ended up leaving the kingdom leadership to his son Solomon. Solomon was he was probably not destined to be the king. It's just a matter of things kind of fell into place that brought Solomon about into his kingship. But when Solomon was a brand new king, God asked him, said, "What do you want?" And Solomon at the time had the wisdom and fortitude to ask God for understanding. And so God made him the wisest man in the world, and probably one of the wisest men in history. And so during that time in Israel where they had an expanded kingdom, they were very wealthy, they were very powerful, they began to incorporate into Israel's literature what we know as poetry, or the poetic books: Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, the book of Job. And these books, really the center or the meaning for them were that they were read predominantly to young men to teach them the concept of wisdom. See, Solomon, during that time, they understood that there's a difference between being intelligent and being wise. There's a difference between being intelligent and being wise. Intelligence is the knowledge of facts that can be applied. Intelligence can help you with a career. Intelligence can help you pass a course. Intelligence can make you look very smart to everybody. Wisdom's different. Wisdom is the art of interaction and interpretation of life, to the extent to where a very wise person impacts humanity around them. And so Solomon sat down, and as they wrote these Proverbs and these Psalms were written, in the book of Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon and the book of Job was brought into literature predominantly before then, because Job's an ancient book, probably the oldest book in the Old Testament. But the idea is that these things were to teach young men not how to be smart, but how to be wise. And all the way through the book of Proverbs, it is sprinkled with proverbs about how we talk. Solomon recognized, the wisest man in the world recognized that how we talk matters. Now, this is very, very relevant to us today, because we live in a day and a time where opinions or things we say are valued above many other things. We really like to share what we think. We share it on social media, we share it on call-in shows, we share it on the street. Anytime a newscaster is going, there'll be a fact or something like that, and they go around the streets and they ask for people for their opinions. And you say, why we have such a prominence of opinions, even opinions that maybe aren't really relevant to the topic or sound quite unwise? Well, this dates right back hundreds of years ago to the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment in Europe, when it happened, people started to question the caste system. They started to question, before that, there were classes of people. And those classes of people, those at the top, were seen as unquestionable or even divine. And across much of Europe and across the world, a leader or a king was never doubted. Their rule was, or their words were law. And there's a system that they used to call in Latin rex lex. Rex lex means the king is law. And so depending on who the king was, determined on how the laws were interpreted or what laws were written or what laws were ignored. It all hinged on that one individual. It worked really well when you had a good king, but most of the time it didn't, because a lot of kings started to buy into their position and became quite cruel or quite callous. And so in the Enlightenment, they started to question this Rex Lex. A man named Samuel Rutherford in England wrote a book or a paper challenging that idea, called Lex Rex. Instead of Rex Lex, instead of the king is law, instead the law becomes king. And he had this view or this image of the world that what we needed to do is put law into words that even a king had to submit to. And so all of a sudden people started to question the class system. And this led to over hundreds of years, different revolutions, different ways of thinking, socialism, capitalism, all these kind of things, to where we have a system now where we see our prime minister as just another guy, or where we see the royal family as just other people. And this has some values. It really does. Nobody seems to get too big for their britches, although it seems like a lot of people do, but it kind of keeps things in check. Keeps our leaders in check, keeps them accountable and things like that. But the downside of it is we are encouraged to just spout whatever comes into our brains, whether it makes sense or not. Because we have valued our opinions so high, we value freedom of speech to such an extent where speech loses its meaning. Because a lot of times when we say things, we haven't really thought about them. And this comes at an also time where we're going through a time where what businesses and interpreters call it data smog. You know what data smog is? Anybody? Ever heard that term before, data smog? What it is basically information and news is thrown at us so quickly we don't have time to process it properly. And because of that, a lot of times we are forced to make snap judgments about broad issues without taking the time to relate to or understanding the context. And so we'll hear about the president, the prime minister, the queen or whatever, and we'll hear something about them and we snap judgment. Well, that's just because they're bad. And what we end up doing is calling each other names. You're a communist. You're a fascist. You're an Islamophobe, or you're a Christian phobe, or you're all these kind of things. I actually never heard Christian phobe, but I'm going to add it to the English language today just for your benefit. Okay? And the question is what does God think of us all spouting our opinions? What does he think about it? Am I accountable for what I have to say? Which is really scary when I think about it, because I talk a lot. And I weigh in a lot, and I evaluate those around me a lot. And that, if God cares about that, then maybe I need to care a little bit more about it too. So we're talking about my big fat mouth. Last week, Scotty did a great job on complaining. That's actually up on YouTube right now if you want to follow up on it. It's just a fantastic message. You did a great job. Now I got to follow him up, which is really unfortunate, but I'm going to do my best. And talk about today criticism. Criticism. Now, is criticism always a bad thing? Sometimes, yeah, not always. If you ask someone to, yes. There's constructive criticism. Yeah, that's what we call criticism that perhaps is pursued, or where we sit down with an employee or a child, or correction, or those kind of things, the idea of correction, which is quite healthy. And you know what? There are times where a little bit of criticism is a healthy thing. But we live in a day and age where opinions have predominantly dominated things so much that we talk to each other and we deeply wound each other by the way we talk, because we criticize too freely and we criticize too openly and we criticize without really knowing necessarily what we're talking about. And I'm the same just as you. I remember I was going to park in Walmart this week, and as I was driving in, one of those happy wanderers wandered in front of me with their car. The ones that don't signal or anything, they just kind of coast right into your lane like you're not even there, and probably they don't know you're there, and things like that. And I have to admit, I'm a holy man. But some thoughts crossed my mind that might have come out of my mouth that were not edifying, right? Another time I was doing construction. I was working in footings at the time, and so we were building kind of these wood structures that eventually they pour concrete in and create the footing for all houses, and we were down in Whitby and we were doing that. And so we did a lot of nailing with a hammer, and I had a 28-ounce hammer. I don't know if you're familiar with the weight of hammers, but normally a 19 to a 22 is your standard hammer. I had a 28 because we really wanted to give it. We wanted to, hit those nails, and we had one guy, he could just hit the nail once it was in. I was a twoozer. I did normally two, and that. I was holding that nail, and I swung it, and I came right down on the fat between my thumb and my fingers. And some words, I don't know where they came from, came out of my mouth. And I remember there's other guys in the crew, and they were like, "Oh, Scott's speaking in tongues." And afterwards I had to apologize for my potty mouth, and that, but I was in a lot of pain, and it just came out, right? But words matter. Do you realize that there's a power to words to wound, but there's also a power in words to elevate those around us? So we've been talking about the 4 topics. Next week, Tyler's going to do lying because he knows a lot about it. And then the week after that, I'm going to do gossip. And we'll be able to walk you through this. So here's the first verse. For the whole law can be summed up in this one command: love your neighbors yourself. But if you're always biting and devouring one another, watch out, beware of destroying one another. And that's found in the book of Galatians. These are questions to ask ourselves as we kind of delve into this topic. The first is, if your mouth was destroying intimacy in your most important relationships? A lot of times, those we love the most suffer our worst words. Often, those we love the most suffer the worst words. And I've heard many of your stories, and I know many of you, maybe you've gone through a divorce or you had parents, and they said something. There was one time where, something happened, and they didn't restrain themselves, and they said something, and to this day, you can believe it like you're just still there. Or sometimes a spouse will say something to each other, and for the rest of the marriage, the person, I can't forget that you said that. I can't forgive that you did that. And sometimes it's carried around. If you talk about the times in your life where you were most wounded, chances are it was the way someone used words that you loved very much. Someone said something to you that deeply wounded you, or somebody said something in public that completely humiliated you. Now, the flip side is true. There will be times in your life where a word given will lift you and elevate you, and you will never forget that encouragement. Like I said, words have things. What if your words are distancing you from friends? What if your inability to make good friendships or deep friendships is your mouth? And you say, well, I just say what I think, or I'm just being me and all that kind of stuff. Well, the thing about it, if I'm just being me a lot, I'm going to be alone, right? Because here's the truth, right? If I said everything that came into my head, I'd probably be in jail, and you would too, right? But what if I don't have friends because of the way I talk? What if I'm damaging my ability to share Christ with other people? What if I claim to be a follower of Christ, but there's anybody around me who doesn't know Christ, they would never, ever find Christ because my example and the way I talk isolates me? What if that's happening? Proverbs, again, this is Solomon. Some people make cutting remarks, but the words of the wise bring healing. Ephesians 4:29, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is hopeful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who wisdom. And here's the thing, you have no idea how much criticism can hurt someone's heart, but you also have no idea how God might use a single word of encouragement to change someone's life. So what do you want to be? First guess, fault finder. Do you want to be a fault finder? There's a verse that says, better to live in a desert, alone in a desert than with a quarrelsome, complaining spouse. Now, in the original language, it says wife because it was talking predominantly to men. But if the Proverbs were written to women, it would have said husband, okay? It really would. People on both sexes are completely capable of having cutting, quarrelsome, complaining words. And quite literally it says this, so if those who are closest to us are miserable and unhappy, it can ruin your whole life. It really can. And I, over the years I've talked to all kinds of people about how I navigate, and sometimes it's legitimate. Sometimes, my partner, my friend struggles with depression. And so it just feels like they're always a weight to be around. Or maybe my spouse has lost their job and they're completely unreasonable, or they're going through a midlife crisis or something. And the question is, how do I survive this? Because we are connected to each other, and often their negativity carries us down. Are we fault finders? Here's a couple of things just to note about fault finding, okay? One is this, and we all know this, but it needs to be said. Those around you that you love the most are not perfect. They are sinful, scarred, imperfect people. But we as followers of Christ believe this to be true, that every individual is made in God's image. Every individual deserves the grace and mercy that God gives. And that our mandate with each other is to love each other even when we're miserable. Now you're saying, I don't want to be a walking mat. You know what? I'm going to err on the other side, because here's the thing. We in North America are so good at not being other people's walking mats that we have no meaningful relationships, okay? Sometimes when you're loving someone and they're going through something, you're going to get hurt. It's worth it. Why is it worth it? Because often on the other side of that hurt, often when we challenge those around us, or we are so miserable to those around us, it's like we're saying, do you still love me? Here's me in all my ugliness. Do you still love me? And they're hard to love during that time. But let me just tell you something. You're going to learn a lot more about love when the person you love is being miserable and a complete freak than you do when they're being lovable. You want graduate level love? Love the person you love when they're being a total jerk. Love somebody when they're being hard on you. Love somebody when you do. Now, there's boundaries and all those kind of things. This is why there's balance in our church. Cheryl's going to come in November and talk about boundaries. But I want you to experiment with something, okay? When you're encountering conflict with those that you love, stick with it a little longer than you think you need to. You say, well, I can't put up with it anymore. I'm just at the end of my rope. Well, I got good news. There might be another rope. Okay? And it's not one you want to hang them with. All right? It talks in the scriptures about bearing with each other. Learning to love each other. Not being fault finders. And that. So that's something. Instead, what we want to become are hope dealers. Now, I said hope dealers, not dope dealers. Okay? There are laws about this. And I learned long ago not to encourage congregants to break the law. I don't know why, but it just doesn't turn out right? Hope dealers. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Hope dealers. Hope dealers are those that you get around and they lift. They're lifters. They're the kind of people you get around and it's just like a buzz, I'm going to single you guys out because I haven't bothered you in a while, but Nick and Jill, whenever I go in your restaurant, I leave just so happy. Because they come over, they talk to you, they put a hand on your shoulder. They're a buzz with love. And everybody in Lakefield knows them. Everybody in Lakefield loves them, at least most people, right? Most people, yeah. And they have an ability to lift others. Whether it's natural or whether it's found, they do it. And there's going to be people like that we all gravitate towards because they help lift us. A lot of times if you take a business and you take businesses, they're exactly the same. They bring in the same revenue, they sell the same things, they do the same things, they have the same quality, all that kind of thing. But place a critical, mean owner boss at the top, or place a loving, grace-filled hope dealer at the top, and you can walk in and in 30 seconds you know what kind of leader is in that business. Because people who are hope dealers lift those around us. We have incredible power to do this. There's just amazing things that we can do in the lives of others. I remember a number of years ago when we first planted the church, and as far as pastors go, there's people who are pastors of large churches. They're held in very high esteem. There's district superintendents and general superintendents and bishops and all those. They're held in very high esteem. And then there's pastors of what they call middle-sized churches. They're held in a certain amount of esteem and they're recognized as a mover and shaker. And then there's the pastor of the small church or the rural church, and they're respected because, their job is hard and everything like that. And then there's youth pastors, assistant pastors, church secretaries, custodians, and way down below that are church planters. You're just looked upon as suspicion because for whatever reason you didn't get in on any of the other levels. You're so bad you got to start something because no respectable church will take you. And so my self-esteem while I was planting the church sometimes suffered some drawbacks. Except for one guy. His name's John. And John was the director of Willow Creek, Canada during that time. Our church was a Willow Creek church. We were so small, we paid the minimum amount to be a Willow Creek church. But John saw every Willow Creek church as the same. And I remember I was invited down to Crossroads, where Hundley Street and everything is amazing, big building and all that kind of thing. And John invited me down, and while I was there, we got to sit in some seminars run by some people, including Bill Hybels. Bill Hybels was kind of the go-to guy who actually started to wake the church in North America up to the fact that, there's a mission field right here. There's lots of people that need Christ. And as churches, we can reach these people. I know that sounds like a revolutionary term, but for years, missions was over there, not here. And Bill Hybels was the one guy, and he took a lot of flack for it, who stood up and said, no, missions is here too. We can reach people for Christ. And started offering practical things. He's written 27 books. He's done all kinds of things. He's an amazing guy. So I was going down to this conference, and I thought, I would see Bill as like a little speck, in the distance and stuff. And so the night before, I stayed at my mom's. My mom has a lot of cats. She has some dogs too. They're Shih Tzus, but makes them like cats anyways. But anyways, at that point, a lot of my nephews and nieces were staying with her because they were students. And so my mom set up a cot in the middle of the living room, okay? And we turned all the lights up. There was heavy curtains. It was pitch black. But during the night, there was one cat who was determined to keep me awake. And how this cat kept me awake, it wasn't purring or coming and sitting with me or whatever. It climbed different pieces of furniture around the room and then would launch off the furniture with a howl and land on all four so there was a bang. And it did this over and over and over. It's just, you just going to sleep, I've never wanted to kill, I couldn't see it. And it was coming from all directions. I thought there were 4 of them. So I'm like really tired, and I get up the next morning, I have my breakfast, and bags under my eyes and all that, and I go down to this conference and stuff, and I come into John, and I say, hey, thanks for inviting me. He said, hey, no problem. He said, how's the church plant going? I said, well, that's good. We're getting some things going and all that kind of stuff. John said, Scott, why don't you sit with me today? Okay. So we went in this room, and in this room, he invited me. I didn't know something. They invited the best of the senior pastors of churches of over 1,500 people into that room. They were the only ones that were allowed. And John brought me with him. Not only that, John sat me at a round table with Bill Hybels. Now, I didn't say much to him. I was too nervous. I just thought, he looks like a Greek god. Like, it's just like, this guy's amazing. He glows, He's just an incredible person. And I sat there and I listened to his answers and I listened to some of the things he said to those guys and I watched him interact in that. I was just in heaven. I was absolutely in heaven. And I said, John, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. That was just amazing. It was really a lift. He said, hey, there's always room at my table for you, Scott. And I can't tell you what that meant to me. Now, I have a little confession to admit. I said to John, Bill Hybels, he had a name tag, and he was wearing it during that time. And while he was getting up presentation, he went to the bathroom or something, he took it off. I said to John, I said, can I have that? So I stole Bill Hybels' name tag. It's still in my office. Anytime I really need inspiration for a sermon, I put it on and I practice, and that's why my messages are so amazing. It's not me, it's Bill. But those little things that people do lift. Ray Hendricks at Rema Christian School was a lifter. Everybody got around him. It was just like, got a buzz about them. You have the capability to do that. And you say, well, how do I do that? Here's just some practical ideas and suggestions. I want you to take this and mull it around in that. Okay, your child may not be the most tidy, compassionate, or thoughtful child, particularly when they're 2. Okay? But here's the thing. You can always find something about your kids to praise. Not flattery. Flattery is like, oh, you're so beautiful. Okay. It's good to encourage your kids that way, and I do the same thing. But praise is when you recognize a characteristic or something they're doing that you call attention to. And so, they do something without asking. I mean, just get all over that. That's amazing. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Or you know what I like about you? Or you know what makes me just so excited when I'm around you? Or you know what? Spending this time just makes my day. Or, look for ways to encourage your kids. Here's the thing. We're often so busy with data smog that we don't give our time to our kids. And you know what? If you want to start as a hope dealer, start with your kids. Start with your kids and your spouse. And then quickly right after, the almost high priority, your pastor. I'm just kidding. Your kids and your spouse. If you can lift them, you can lift anybody. Because they are the ones who will have the deepest impact. Okay, if you're in school and you got a roommate, maybe they eat your food, wear your clothes, but they're loyal friends. Appreciate them for it. Compliment them for it. Every roommate, they have tiffs. When I went to Eastern Pentecostal Bible College, I had the same roommate for 4 years, Fraser Roberts, who's from Gander, Newfoundland, actually Ambrie, Newfoundland. And we were the funniest couple. I'm 6'5" and tall, and Fraser's, 5'4", 5'5", and short, and kind of a smaller guy. Like, we looked like Twiddledee and Twiddledum when we wandered around. But we became really good friends. But I got to say something. In our second year, we got in a fight over a couple girls. And he lost, I know, but, actually he won. He went out with a girl, but I got Krista, which is way better, so that's awesome. But that end of that year, we almost broke up, Fraser and I. And we said some really hurtful things like, I'm not sure I want to room with you next year. And you're really ugly, and your feet stink. And, just stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we both realized that our friendship was worth going through for. So we went home, had a good summer, came back, and we became very close. And we're great. And, Fraser wasn't perfect, although I have to say he's about as perfect as they come. You know what Fraser's greatest talent was? He put up with me. Because rooming with me is not easy, okay? I was all energy and, talking in my sleep and snoring and snorting and, all that kind of stuff. And he was about as proper a person as they come, okay? He was Mr. Hospital Corners. I remember his bed. He used to pull the sheets aside. He used to lie in his bed like this, pull the sheets up, and then he slept with his head like this under his pillow. Like his pillow was above and he slept like that. I was thinking, that's gotta hurt. But in the morning, he would wake up, get out of that bed, put the covers back, and the bed looked made instantly. Now you look over at my bed, okay, and you'd have a pillow here and a blanket on the ceiling and, all kinds of stuff, socks here and all that kind of stuff. Because when I go to bed, I mean it. Right? I do not sleep in a wimpy way. Okay? My wife calls me the fish. Okay? Flounder. Because it takes me a while to get comfortable, okay? But this is the contrast we had, but we became good friends. What about your mom? Maybe she's not the most organized person. Maybe mom's late for some things. Maybe mom, doesn't get around to some things in that, but she's a good mom. She's there when you need her. She always greets you with a smile. She's always willing to hug you, Maybe your mom needs some encouragement. Maybe your mom needs that kind of hope dealing. Or maybe dad can't win yard of the month, but tell him when he does something right. Maybe dad isn't, the highest in his company, he's not the lowest, or maybe he does something very simple. But he's an incredible person. When I was 17, I moved in with an English family. I lived with them for a couple of years, and they taught me manners. And the real dominant person in the house was Ma Barker. She hated it when I called her that, but she's passed away, so I can get away with it. Her name was Hazel, and she was by the rules. Everything was by the rules. And she determined she was going to straighten me out, okay? And we had a lot of conflict. But I know she loved me, and I know, I used to at times antagonize her. She had this dog, Arthur, a yellow lab. Arthur was completely unmanageable. He was just full of beans, and he was always stealing her slippers and all that kind of stuff. He was just always getting into trouble. And we always had tea time, and I thought tea time was kind of cool, and she was teaching me how to drink with the pinky out and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes I would just get I got to bug somebody. And so she'd be reading her paper, and I'd take my tea, and I'd watch her eyebrows go above the paper. And there'd be a pause, and then there'd be a, Mr. Wheeler, would you please cease and desist from slurping your tea? And I'd wait about 10 minutes, and then do it again. I just love doing that. But her husband, Neville, was one of the most humble, or is one of the most humble, wonderful people. And well, Hazel represented truth. Neville represented mercy and grace. And it's really interesting because, I talk about those 2 years I roomed there and lived with them and things like that, and talk about the discipline I learned, which are really valuable. But probably the most valuable thing I learned was how to be a man, and how to be a man full of grace and mercy. Neville was a mechanic. When he was younger, he had had a soccer accident, and he had put his back out in a way that it was never right again. He had, on what you call it, the discs are all crushed and everything like that. And so every day was pain for Neville. He also had major arthritis, so his fingers were all twisted and turning, and it made being a mechanic quite painful. A bad back and sore fingers. But every day he went to work with a smile. Every day he had a good attitude, and every day he looked for ways to lift those around him. Neville's 80 now. He walks with a walker, he tells me. And I was talking to him on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and he's exactly the same. His wife had just passed away, and he was looking for ways to lift me up when I was calling to console him. He is a hope dealer. Here's the question. It's very simple. Do you want to be a fault finder or a hope dealer? What do you want to do? The words you say and the way you treat those around you has eternal ramifications. Instead of it being in a negative sense, look for it in a positive sense. Giving your opinion, most of the time, probably isn't needed. Really. Giving your criticism, most of the time, probably isn't needed. In fact, a lot of times when we're talking about gossip in a couple of weeks, criticism often comes at the expense of others without their knowledge. And here's the question. Do I treat people like they're made in the image of God and respect and love them? Or do I look at everybody around me as a target to measure myself against? The way they drive, or the way they act, or the things they say, or the way they say it, all those kind of things. I was thinking Costco, yes, yeah. I won't go there, but yeah. No? No, okay. I've been told. All right. I asked, yeah. There's no telling how much God might use a single word of encouragement in your life. There's no telling. Okay? So your words matter. They matter to God. And they matter in this world. Just because everybody's talking doesn't mean they're saying anything. Just because everybody's talking doesn't mean they're saying anything. Be people who say something that matters. Has eternal ramifications. How you treat your spouse, your kids, your coworkers, other students, your teachers. How you talk about people matters because they were made in the image of God, even if what they're doing drives you crazy. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. We got a couple minutes for questions, and then we'll have a little advertisement for our next series. Anybody have a question or something they want to ask? If I haven't pummeled you to sleep. Anybody? Question or comment? Yes, one up here. I see that hand.
I think there's some people that just seem to have such a gift for encouraging other people, and I love the fact that it's habitual with them. Like they make a point of building their life around doing that, and it's something that I need to aspire to, because I think sometimes they don't even know what they've done, or what they've said, how huge an impact it's had on those around them. You know what I mean? It's just the regular course of their day. It's not really cost them anything to be kind or to encourage or to do whatever. But for the person that's receiving it, it's huge. Yeah. And it changes and affects and makes such a difference. You know, so for me, this is a really good morning to just be kind of challenged to going, okay, what can I do with my words? Yeah. Because the payoff is so huge when it's done well. Yeah. That's a good comment. Yes, Jill. How you doing, sweetheart?
I'm good. Sorry I've been away so long.
No, it's okay.
My comment was just sometimes what comes out of your mouth might sound okay, but what you're saying with your body as you're saying it actually says something totally different to the person you're talking to. Yeah. And it's sometimes much bigger. So and sometimes it's your attitude. Nick will know. Yeah. I don't care sometimes how my kids do or say something. It's the attitude that they do.
It's the attitude they do. Yeah, I understand completely. I think, Jill, and I'm just going to speculate a little bit here, is communication's so much more than words. I mean, we're talking about words because words are the tip of the spear, right? They're kind of the thing that comes out. But when we talk about communication, we talk about everything, how we listen, how our arms are, you know, all those kind of things, how we are perceived by the person. The root that comes to, again, which I believe in general terms forms, is a condition of your heart. It's a condition of your heart. Where God is in your heart, where you see other people in your heart, all those kind of things. John Maxwell has written a lot of books on leadership. I really like them. And he talks about a process of learning. He talks about the first stage is I don't know what I don't know. And he says the second phase is I know what I don't know. So the third phase is I know and grow and it starts to show. And his last one is I simply go because of what I know. And you know, this is a process. Learning to use your words effectively is a lifelong talent that has to be developed, honed, corrected, all those kind of things. What I want you to do today is start. And if you're already doing it, I want you to work on it, perfect it. How do you make people around you? Some people are gregarious and they just have this ability to lift everybody because they're life of the party. You know, there's kind of parties waiting to happen with people. In fact, some of you probably just saw a bunch of people and joined us today because you want to be part of the party, right? But here's the thing. Most of us have to work on it a little bit. And often the ones that we struggle the most with working on are those who are closest with us, okay? And so here's your homework. Look for ways to build up and edify those people and hone this skill. And if your heart's in the right condition, the body language is so much better. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference if someone comes to listen to you and you're kind of like this, and hey, you know, you're focusing on them or talking to them and those kind of things. This is a simple example, but great comment. Thank you, Joe. You're so smart. Anybody else? All right, we just got a little advertisement for our next series that's coming in March, and then we'll close in a song. Oh, while we're doing that, better pass the baskets. Baskets will come out. The Audis will come out first, and they're the ones you take out offering envelopes, response cards if you want to be on our email list or anything like that. You take out one of the little cards for if you want to use the tap at the back, just go see Selena afterwards, but we still need your name and things written on there. So you'll see them. They're just little cards in green, and grab one of those and take a pen. After that, all the things that you give or fill in or whatever they want to get back to us, put in the any baskets which come around afterwards, except for those ones where you tap or give by credit. Go take those back to Selena after the service and she'll process them for you. While we're doing that, we'll have a short video for you.
I don't even know what to say. You gotta stop putting these on before I come up here. Why don't you stand and we're gonna close with Give Me Jesus.
Just give me Jesus. When I am alone, when I am alone, when I am alone, give me this world, just give me Jesus, give me Jesus, give me Jesus, you can have all this world, just give me Jesus. Come to die, when I come to die, Lord, when I come to die, give me Jesus. Jesus. You can have all this world. Just give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. You can have all this world. You can have all this world. You can have all this world. Just give me Jesus.
You just grab a seat for a second. There's a couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about a series called Death to Selfie. It's a series about overcoming ourselves. It really is, and it'll be a good one. Second, this week's Valentine's, but I know a lot of you are single, and so what I have with me is a pickup pigeon. And so if you're feeling unloved, I want you to come to the front. You just give them a little squeeze, and
Valentine, you are looking fine. Hey there, cutie. Wanna be lovebirds? Hey, did you just fly in from heaven? 'Cause you know pigeon.
okay? So if you are feeling neglected this Valentine, and Valentine's horrible if you're single, right? If you're feeling that this week, just on Sunday, come up a couple coos from this little bird, and you're going to feel right as rain, okay? And then also the Kellers, you guys won the coffee card this week, and so you can get something tall and share it. And you may notice we have a second screen. And you probably came in today, looked over and said, oh my goodness, he's out of control. And I am, okay? Eventually what we're going to do is we'll have the two screens. We'll move things into the middle here, and the room will be kind of like U-shaped around us. Our resident genius in room design, Eric Wheeler, my son, who is a genius because he's my kid, is trying to find ways, to make things happen that way and things like that. But in the coming weeks, we're going to have it so that we can see people over there and here, and everybody can see a screen and that kind of things. And we're going to do some fun stuff with video. Nothing that you probably haven't seen before, but those kind of things in the coming weeks and things like that. So pray for us. God's been good to us. We've been able to upgrade our equipment and all those things. And I've heard a number of you say how much you like the big screens because you can see the words and everything's really visible and that kind of thing. So we're glad we can encourage in that way. So as you go this week, be a hope dealer, all right? Remember your words matter. That often times we say things that have no meaning. But instead, if we hone our words as we look at people around us as made in God's image and try to lift others, you may be surprised at how much you lift yourself. So in that, go with God. We'll see you next week. God bless you.